everyone, and welcome back to another video. Today I am joined by the absolutely wonderful Rosie Bergonzi, who is a musician, percussionist, and now poet as well. And I'm very proud to say, a very good friend of mine. I love her to bits, and I'm sure you will too. So, hi, Rosie.
Hi everyone. Hi Rachel. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, thank you so much for joining me. I'm very, very excited to do this because um, we've known each other, what, 5, 6 years now, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's long, long time.
The
Um,
years have slid away.
and still not long enough. But yeah, you are releasing a new poetry EP, aren't you? Which is very, very exciting. Do you want to tell my viewers a little bit about that before we kind of jump into any details about anything?
Yeah. So it. I never really considered myself a poet. I work with sort of beats, percussion, instruments. I used to when I was a kid. I used to love writing poetry in English. But you get older and people sort of say, "Oh, you have to be one thing." So I was like, "Okay, cool. I guess I'm like the music person. Like that's great. I love music."
That was
And
exactly
then
my experience.
yeah. And then during lockdown, I felt I had these feelings that normally I can express myself through music, but these just like weren't like bing bong bong thoughts. These were like words. And yeah, I sat down one night and I just wrote basically all of hashtag, but sort of. And then obviously I edited it, but it just kind of like bleh. And I hadn't had that feel. Really haven't had that feeling for words came out. And then I was like, oh no, I think I have to share this with people.
I remember you were so nervous when you first wrote it and you shared it with us. And I was like, Rosie, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And it was like, when you discover like a new band you like, or a new favorite food, or a new something like that, it was like that with your poetry. And I was like, you have talent. Like, it felt like finding something special, which is amazing.
Hmm.
But your EP is called Poems About Race, right?
Yes,
Yeah. And is it a full poem collection? Am I right with that?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've been sat on these poems for quite a while. Why are you releasing them now? And why is an EP and not like a pamphlet or a book or anything like that?
Well, I think because of my music background, like I want the poems, I guess I have a bit of a control. I want them to be experienced in the way that I sort of deliver them. Although it is also nice. And while putting together the kind of pamphlet, I guess, for you, I was
Mhm.
like, oh, it's also nice to see them written down
Yeah.
and to lay them out like that as well. So that might be something I'll sort of think about doing at some point
Yeah.
potentially.
I think
But
that
yeah,
is
it makes sense to be auditory for me because
that's what I was
and
about to say. I think my background's like very visual and very into photography, whereas you're auditory and you're a performer at heart. So it makes sense that you want to perform your work, right?
yeah. And why now? Well, I recorded them at home in lockdown. So obviously the quality was as you might expect for some of that stuff, being not a techie person in that way at all. And then I sort of sat on them for a while and I just felt a lot of the poems were about this time of life where things felt really exciting and maybe things were going to change and these exciting conversations were opening out. And now we're sort of like 3 years later and some things have changed and improved, I guess, is the most silver lining way of saying it. But many haven't. Many things feel the same. There are a lot of incredibly scary things going on in the world that feel like we're going backwards. So, I guess I kind of hoped that there would be no more life for them once they were done. They would be like, these exist in this time. They're like about this very static point. But luckily, everyone's still racist. So
Well, there's such as I was going to touch on later in the video, but now you brought it up, it seems like a great time to talk about it because you were really inspired by the Black Lives Matter movement and
yeah.
obviously like a lot of the racism and prejudice you've experienced. And that's the thing, even a few years on, they still feel so relevant. It feels
Mm.
like there's something that should be of the time, but instead they're timeless.
Yeah.
So can you maybe like expand on a few details about like what you think has changed in the world and what hasn't since you first wrote them?
So I wanted to release it in May because it was so anchored around the murder of George Floyd. Like that was the catalyst for so many things. And I feel, there's still so many, Black people, especially in America, we can point to many recent tragedies, and similarly over here. So it felt those things still feel super relevant, super ongoing. And yeah, I do feel that there have been positive changes. I've been personally involved in a lot of kind of diversity inclusion groups.
Yeah.
So big organizations kind of taking a look at themselves and wondering if they are doing enough. Spoiler, they are not. And kind of finding ways to keep the conversation moving and open. I'm seeing a lot more in my field of classical music. I'm seeing a lot more programming of non-white composers, which is really cool. I mean, it's still the same, like, few names being thrown around, but that's okay. The canon exists. Like, let's work with that. And some really lovely kind of grassroots things that I'm seeing is I work in a few different schools often. I go in and I do workshops, and I've seen just some of the displays of things that I never saw in my childhood, like, you know, a focus on Floella Benjamin, or like, you know, these people are immigrants to the country. What's their story like? How is that? You know, and looking and learning all about, like, there was one all about like the very specific village in like Ghana, like an Uwe village, and I was just like, this, I didn't remember any of this. I remember we did like maybe like the Egyptians, and like we were like, slavery happened, and that was like it at school. And these are primary school kids, like having language to talk about race and racism in a way that I hadn't seen. So I performed a poem hashtag recently to an audience of broadly adults, but there was a couple of kids there, and this kid who was like 4 sort of came up and was like, yeah, and that's wrong because that's people talking about skin color and it shouldn't be different. And I was just like,
Oh, bless
you
them.
understand?
See, that's,
you know,
amazing. That's why you need to talk to kids about this stuff so early, so they do understand and they do relate to it. And like, you know, because I think now, thankfully, a lot more schools are becoming way more diverse. Like, I remember my primary school was just like all white kids. And it's, I mean, you can't help it, it's where you grow up, but at the same time, it's like it took me a long time to actually like hear from other people and their experiences and their backgrounds. And now I think if we can make it a part of the education where kids are learning about that stuff from a young age, like, that can only be a positive thing, right?
Absolutely. And the same way that it's expected that we learn about, I don't know, the Victorians or these kinds of pillars of what you do in primary school, the fact that the world is so interconnected and we can have a conversation with, you know, a child in another country or whatever, I feel like that's been a really specific positive improvement.
So a lot of your poems do touch on really personal experiences of yours, and like actual things people have said to you and actual racism you faced. And I've always found that when I write about very personal things in poems, it's a little scary sharing them with people. Do you feel that as well, or do you feel it's a little bit more empowering, or both?
Yeah, it's scary. I mean, I think the one. So as I was coming back to kind of re-listen to the songs and re-release them and re-prepare them, I'm just sort of like walking around London, like listening to my songs, and every time I get to the one about my hair, I'm just like, you know, and it's, I wonder if I'll get to the point that I can speak about these poems without them like drawing that emotion out, or if that would even be a good thing. But currently, they still feel like so raw, so that when I'm kind of performing them or speaking about them, like, they are real things that happen to me and are hard to speak about. And that one especially, there's a lot about my mum in it. So obviously I checked with her and spoke to her, and she was like, oh yeah, and then so she signed off on all of it. She was really happy that I was talking about it all and all of that stuff. Super proud of me. And like a year or two after I sort of first put any of these poems out, my mum was like, oh, I listened to that one about your hair again. It's so good. Obviously it made me cry again. And I was just like, whoa, you know, and said with like pride and love, like no malice in it at all. So that's, I guess, a thing of not only sharing my experiences, but also like her allowing me to share her experience as well, which was, you know, very generous of her. But yeah, I think I love that there's bits of me in the poems, and that was really important, and bits of people I love. But yeah, it's scary. It makes it really hard to kind of be detached from them.
I guess like it's different because if people criticize your work, it can feel like a criticism of you and your experiences. When in reality, that's probably not necessarily the case, but it is hard to detach, isn't it?
Well, I think I liken it to being a workshop leader in a way. So I go into schools, I speak to children, I'm like doing all this stuff, and people say like, why do you do that? Like how, or being, I guess I liken it to being any kind of performer, because who I am on stage is a version of me. Like I couldn't be anyone else on stage, but it's not all of me. I'm not the same me in the pub. I'm not the same me talking to you. I'm not the same me talking to a child. I'm not the same me talking to thousands of people. Like It
What
has
do you
to
mean?
be.
Are you saying me and you drinking wine in a field at Glastonbury isn't the same you in front of a class of kids?
Yeah, it's the same. It's the same primary school
I thought
energy.
so, yeah.
I mean, to be honest, it basically is. We like dancing around like primary school kids. But like I like to think of it as like I am a light in the middle, and all I'm doing is like opening different shutters to it. Kind of finding, which I think I haven't found yet, but finding the poetry persona,
Mhm.
for want of a better word, who is me but is protected in some way. I think
Yeah.
separating those things is important, and I haven't done it quite yet. So, because when I came to publish these poems, I was really on the fence as to whether I would do it under a different name, because I have my kind of handpan
Oh,
songs.
really?
I've got some, on my Spotify so
Yeah.
far. I've got a Christmas album.
And
Love.
they're brilliant.
I've got some sort of handpan music about like the sea. It's like
Mhm.
very relaxing and sort of tranquil. And then sort of there's these poems about race just about to come out.
Mhm.
And yes, they do use the handpan in them. Yes, I play all the percussion on it. Like they're all me in that way, but they're so kind of different. And for a
Yeah.
while, I was like, should I have a different channel, different alias, different person? And I was like, well, no, like they are all me. They are all me. So
I think that's something that like a lot of us, I guess, like performers and public figures struggle with. Because I know it's something that I've struggled with. Like on my channel, I have so many different kinds of videos. I have my book reviews, my poetry videos, my science videos, my history videos, the social commentary, all this stuff. And some people are like, oh, why don't you have separate channels for different topics? And I'm like, well, I could, but at the end of the day, they're all facets of me and all parts of who I am. And I'm not like a brand. I'm not a company. I'm an individual who's making content. And I guess it's the same for you and your music and your poetry. It's like they're all different facets of you as a person. And in some ways, I think it's important to show people that you are multifaceted and there's like so much to you, so many different sides, and they all need to be
yeah.
celebrated.
Or like so my YouTube channel as well.
Mm.
Like I make these handpan or rhythm tutorial videos. So like helping,
Mm.
like some basic fun rhythm games. All of these things is like one genre.
Mm.
And then when I put out my first poem about race, I lost subscribers. Like,
Really?
yeah. Yeah. I mean, like we're talking about like in the fives. Like I don't have a but it was
No, but
so
still.
wild to see that. And then I also gained them as well, I
Yeah.
guess. But it because it is a sort of on the most generous read of that is the people came for the tutorials and they wanted the tutorials and this wasn't tutorials. But there's also a bit of me that's like, oh, do you not want me to have any kind of personality outside of like the friendly smiley person who teaches you about semi like quavers or whatever?
So, in terms of like poetry specifically, do you think, because I feel like in some ways poetry's had a bit of resurgence in popularity over the last few years, but it's still not really cool or mainstream yet. So, do you think, so for me personally, there's something about poetry that can reach people in a way that sometimes other mediums can't. Is that why you chose poetry, or why do you think you sort of gravitated towards it for this?
Yeah, I used to love poems. Like when I
Mhm.
was a teenager, I was love creative writing club.
Mhm.
Shout out to Richards. Um, and I used to spend a lot of time and I sort of process my feelings through poetry.
Mhm.
I've always written journals and diaries and stuff. So like I used words in that way. Um, but and then I love rhythms and
Yeah.
so kind of like rap. I'm hesitant to call it rap because I feel like rap is very cool and I don't know if I'm that cool.
I think
you
you'd
know.
be cool enough to rap. You're one of
Okay,
the coolest
okay,
people I know.
okay. Um, but yeah, so I guess it sits in the intersection. It's like some spoken word rap poetry because it's poetry but to a beat,
Yeah.
which is rap, I guess. But but yeah, it feels like it just felt right. Like, and I think I'd written some words, and I actually think it was maybe Carrie Ann, our other friend, who was sort of like, yeah, this is like a rap, like this is like a poem, like
Yeah.
you need to like, I don't know, it kind of almost fell into this like natural aligning. Like I love my kind of varied career,
Yeah.
and my favorite jobs are ones that combine like seemingly disconnected things that I like doing. So like yeah, kind of rhythms and beats and music in that sense, and then the words on the other side and the kind of performance element. I was like, oh my gosh, this is a thing. Like I'll just like this is a thing. So I don't think it was like intentional in that way. I just kind of, yeah, it all came together, I guess.
I think there's something about poetry where you can speak about such specific things that happen to you, and they come across in a way that's so universal that almost anyone can relate to it. Like you've spoken about like in certain poems like specific things that have been shouted at you, or like, you know, names people have called you and stuff, and even though they're specific to you, I think it's something that so many people are going to be able to relate to and be like, oh god, I've been through something like that. People have said stuff like that to me. Or if they haven't, it's a way of kind of connecting with you and understanding what you've actually been through, which I think poetry can do that in a way that maybe like say a blog post, for example, wouldn't have.
Yeah. I like the challenge of making it bite-sized as well, like making it concise. I'm not a very concise person. Making it like like trying to get to the essence of like, what am I trying to say? Like in prose you're allowed to waffle or like decorate in that way, whereas like
Poetry
I feel
is
like
so saturated with meaning.
each word has to mean more than you just like, it's not just one word. And getting that choice, getting that specificity of what, how ironic. Yes. Specificity of words.
We're good with words.
But it kind of ties in, like when I open my mouth, like I was speaking to my mate and she was just like, do you ever think before you speak? I was like, no. Like I just open my mouth and like words just like tumble out and they get all jumbled on the way out, and that's like I speak very fast, like they come out. Having the opportunity to be like, no, there is going to be one of two words in this place. Think about it, choose it. This one. Oh no, actually that one. Okay, yeah, that one. And then that's like, it's a different way of working. It's like slightly less natural to me, maybe, but it I love it. Like, and then these poems exist, and then wherever I take them, whatever way I perform them, unless I perform them wrong, then they are. That's like crystallized in time. I love that.
But you also play around with structure as well, which I think is really cool. And you have your meaning kind of in the structure as well. So you have a lot of like repetition in some poems, which I really like. You've got the lines that kind of you repeat throughout, but they change slightly each time. Like in the one where you have the "I don't trust you, white folk," that ends up with "I don't trust you, white folk yet," and things like that. And you have that progression in the structure. And I think that's amazing. Did you find that was it maybe came a little easier to you than the sort of word choice, or was it equally as challenging?
I guess it kind of comes, I guess, from speaking. Like my poetry comes kind of out loud onto paper. So it's sort of altering it as it goes through. And that's a really musical thing as well, to have like a chorus. And then the second time you have a chorus, like, I don't know, the drums come in bigger. The third time it's like saxophone solo. So I think there's like a kind of idea of altering as you go through, maybe, which, or certainly a lot of the music that I love kind of like changes as it goes through. But yes, this kind of idea of like having a point, I guess, and like seeing it through different, like each of the kind of many of the in that one, each of the sort of stanzas is like a little different diversion back to that central point of is it going to be okay? I think it's going to change, or maybe not.
But that's the thing, the structure mimics what you want to see in the world, you know. There's so many cycles of it always going back to the same thing, but at the same time you are making ever so slight progression, and that's kind of what you want to see in the world. I mean, not the cycles hopefully, but the progression.
Or like if you've ever had those arguments with people and it feels like it's going around, but then maybe they say, okay, no, I do get that, but
conceding little points, and then
yeah,
that makes sense. I do like that. So do you have any inspirations in terms of poets or musicians or anyone whose work inspired this collection?
My answer is probably always K Tempest. Like to any question.
Amazing. Did you see them at Glastonbury? I can't remember if you were there by then. They performed on the stage.
Yeah, we arrived and I was literally like, okay, yeah, bye everyone, and I ran straight over and turned up, cried. Like,
God. They're amazing, weren't they? I was like second row for that, and I was just sobbing the entire time. They were amazing.
It was like good crying. And I saw them. I was on a tour circuit with the singer Nana Chenery, who's great and definitely another inspiration to me. And yeah, actually her way of, so Nana Chenery's way of rapping is also, it's very storytelling. Like it's very sort of, there is a history of I don't know how to say the word. Yeah, it's very storytelling, I guess, is
Yeah.
the way that I really liked that. So, and she's a brilliant performer. So definitely put her. But I was there on the same tour circuit. So we saw Kay a few times. And the first time I saw books of traps and lessons, book of traps and lessons, I was just stood there and I was just like, I want to you know, and I think that vulnerability on stage really is huge. Like, to just be able to stand and speak is always so inspirational.
They're absolutely like my inspiration. If I could have like, God, I don't know, like a quarter of the charisma and confidence and just like talent on stage as them, I will be happy.
Yeah.
So, what sort of response have you had from people so far for your work? Because I know you said you lost a couple of subscribers when you first put them out, but they're the kinds of people we don't want listening anyway.
It's been, yeah, I mean, it's been great. Like, I think if I'm making music, you know, I feel like I tend to know if it's good or not ish.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously I'm incredibly critical of myself, but I should have
Well.
some, yeah. So I've been immersed in music for long enough that I should at least have some level of objectivity, even if I am very rude to myself. Whereas with this, it just felt like a whole new world. So I was so lucky to be in like the whole MIFT community. Just to know so many incredible songwriters and sort of lyricists and poets and people that do work with words that I trusted, to be honest. So it was a process of me showing it to some people and being like, don't just, you know, butter me up. Like, genuinely, what should I do with this, or how can? And they gave me so many improvements as well. Like, it wasn't just like, that was great, which is super cool. And asking my friends from different sort of genres of music or performing generally, because I just felt like I wasn't sure if it was any good. I just didn't know. So having people to say it was good was good. Point.
No, I think that's something we all go through. Like when I started writing, I was like, oh, well, I've been doing this, but it's terrible. And I remember it was the first people I ever showed one of my poems to, like when I've been writing these past few years, was Daisy and Carrie Ann. And we've been doing like a late night mift during lockdown. And like for viewers who don't know, basically it's like how do you describe mift?
It feels like a group of fools who meet up and hang out, and kind of people who we are all sort of trying to do the freelance thing generally in like different fields, generally kind of music-y,
Yeah.
creativity.
Yeah, definitely like creatives. So it
Yeah.
started with me, Daisy, Lou, and Elizabeth in Daisy's kitchen. And we would just like meet up and talk work stuff because they were all musicians. I was doing freelance marketing at the time and only just starting YouTube. So we were all kind of helping each other out, and it's just kind of grown to something wonderful since then, hasn't it? Where we all kind of support each other and work with each other and help each other out.
Yeah. And it really comes to community, I think, because it can be so lonely being a freelancer. Like, especially like, say, as a percussionist, right? I don't meet other percussionists normally, because why would you book two?
Yeah.
You know, so you're sort of there on your own, like doing these sort of things, or two gigs come in, or you know, it's you need other people who have like maybe made the mistake, so you maybe don't make the mistake, or who maybe like had the great thing and are like, go for this great thing. And it's so hard. I think our job, like whenever I try and explain my job, it doesn't make sense. Like, people are like, and then on my week, they're like, what are you doing on Tuesday? I'm like, oh, Tuesday I'm in a primary school. And then they're like, Wednesday, I'm like, oh, Wednesday the Royal Albert Hall. It's like, what? Like, it's just this like complete, there's no path. So having people who are also struggling around through that no path is invaluable.
And I think also like people who are inspirations as well. Like if it wasn't for Daisy, for example, I wouldn't have had half the opportunities I've had. Like because she asked me to perform at Glastonbury with them, that's when I got the confidence to actually start performing by myself. And that's how I got the confidence to publish my poetry book and like all this stuff. So it's because, you know, people like Daisy are encouraging us. People like Carrie Ann, her lyrics are so beautiful. She's such an inspiration to me. And like you, like showing me your poetry and publishing, well, I guess like publishing it online as videos, like again, such an inspiration to me. And I don't know, I feel incredibly lucky to know you all. I'm very, very grateful for you all.
Me too.
Anyway, I'm getting all mushy now. So My next question is, where do you see yourself going with your poetry in the future? Do you think you'll write more? Do you think you'll release more? What kind of topics do you want to talk about?
I don't know. I love sort of songwriting now. That's
Mm.
so it was kind of interesting. So the first three poems are completely spoken.
Mm.
And then the fourth one, I was just like recording it, and the person, Yulia, who helped me record it, she was just like, "Oh, you could sing that chorus," and I was like, "Me? No!" And she was like, "Yeah, oh, like you don't have to, you could." And I was like, tried it, and then we were just like, "Oh, that's cool," and that was really also kind of interesting because then I was suddenly like, I could sing, like, I could sing, like,
Who
and
would
that's
have
another
thought
kind of
such a multi-talented woman could sing?
I just I can sing well. you know
Well, I think you
um
sound great.
and so then I kind of have really enjoyed putting poetry into song, um or like to like creating sort of song lyrics and stuff. So that's kind of where my focus has been for the past couple of years, a little bit more, like, and getting so specifically into the handpan, which like does lend itself really well to singing. Like whenever I try and sort of like rap and play the handpan, I just can't, because it's just like, I don't know, like the rhythms like squidged together.
Oh, that's
Whereas the
interesting.
singing, I don't know, or maybe it's because it's a melodic instrument. So I haven't written sort of poetry. I don't, and I sometimes wonder if it's like I just like had these four and they just like came out, and then I'm like, oh, it's great. Or
That's it.
whether
Be
there's
done
like,
now. Or
yeah,
yeah,
or whether there'll be another sort of thing that sparks up that I can only say through poetry again.
yeah.
Like, and I did. I remember I'd sort of sat down to write a poem, and I was like, I'm gonna write a poem, and I just like couldn't at all. So like, I guess they certainly came like meaning first
Mhm.
out of me rather than like genre first, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. And then as on their way out, I loved shaping them and refining them and making them. But yeah, so I'm still writing things and I'm still using words, and it's been so empowering for me to know that the words don't even need like melody to stand, because poetry is words. And it's like by doing that, almost like baptism of
Mhm.
fire, by just being so open with the words, I'm then feeling so much more confident to make songs or use them as lyrics or sort of change them, twist them again in that way.
Yeah. That's amazing. It's really nice to see like such an organic evolution of like your creative process. That's
Yeah.
amazing. So one last question for you before you're going to do us a little performance, aren't you, of one of your poems, I think, which I'm
Yeah.
very, very excited for. But one last question is, I have a lot of aspiring poets and writers and musicians who watch my videos. Do you have any advice for them?
Do it. Do it. Whatever it is, do the thing. Like I genuinely like got everything ready to share, and my finger was like and then I had to do it, just close the laptop and just like go for like a run or something, like a puppy. Like I just, it was, the sharing is so scary, but then putting the second one out was less scary, and the third one, and then the fourth one was super scary again because that was by my hair and myself. But the point is that it's like any muscle. It's like flexing. The being brave muscle is another thing that you have to practice doing it. And yeah, sharing it, I think, is just amazing. People will want to hear what you're saying, so share it.
That's amazing. Thank you so, so much. So yeah, you are going to perform a poem for us in a second. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that first?
Yeah, so this one is this poem is sort of about speaking to my friends, basically, because I did the first one and that was speaking to my friends, but speaking to kind of everyone about how race is is not a one-time conversation, it's an ongoing conversation. And then in response to that, I got some people saying like, oh, why are you talking about black lives, like why aren't you saying about all lives matter? And so then that second poem, like kind of being like, when I say black lives, you say all lives, like it's about, that was to the more kind of combative people, like the people, I guess it was talking to the people that I knew weren't actually gonna be swayed by a 3 minute poem anyway. But it was kind of sort of pointing out that if you only exist in like opposition
Mm-hmm.
to a marginalized group, like maybe you don't really like have such a strong identity. So yeah, kind of talking about like you're an echo, you're a shadow, like. But then this third one, that one was kind of about like, yeah, to my actual friends or to my colleagues or people who are close to me, people who do already love me or like me or care, and to sort of say that it's not good enough to just have a black friend. Like,
Yeah.
you know, it and to like never notice, I
Yeah.
guess. So it was kind of talking about how like even if like you need to be having these conversations with the people around you, and like I'm not allowed into certain spaces, or certain people aren't going to say certain things in front of me because being black is, they can see that I'm black. um so it's got to be a job that everyone is doing to like challenge things and to speak up about things. And I focused it around race, but it goes for so many of the fights that we still see going on, the queer fights, trans fights, disability, ableism, like sexism, anything where you are not the person who's being spoken about, you still need to be engaged in that way.
Yeah. I literally spoke about this in a video recently on like why we need intersectional feminism. And I was like, one of the things I've learned in the last few years is that it's not enough to just not be exclusionary. You have to be actively inclusionary.
Yeah.
And it's such an important thing that I think it's very easy to forget and we keep needing to be reminded of.
Yeah.
You can't just be like, oh, well, I'm not racist, because unless you're, as you say in this poem, unless you're anti-racist, what's the point?
I mean, I was literally in a debate, or at like it was in a pub, but I was at a debate between a white woman and a black man about who has it harder. And I was like, and of course, I fully know that there are some struggles that are unique to white women. There are some struggles that are unique to black men.
Yeah.
A lot of them is a crossover.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, and it's just this kind of like, and of course people are doing such good work advocating for their groups, as they should be, like, and that's amazing. I'm not slighting on either of those people who are both really active in their communities, but unless you can once those blinders are on so tunnel vision and you're only focused on this one group, you need to open that out and include everybody, or at least a few more people. Like you can't get the circle big enough to care about everyone, sure, but like let's at least like get it bigger.
That's why I really like poems like Your One About Your Hair, because like it feels like a very feminist poem as well as being about race. Because like for so often I feel like feminism has been dominated by just like white middle class women, and it's like okay, but what about everyone else?
Yeah.
What about like women of color? What about working class women? What about trans women?
Yeah.
And I feel like your poem is just like one part of a big movement in poetry, especially today, that is going, it's going some of the way to be more inclusive.
Yeah, because like we've all been catcalled, right?
Sadly.
And so then to kind of
happened
have
to me
that
the other day, literally outside my house.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Love that the world is just
so safe.
Like, so we've all, or many people have had that, many women, or just many people have had that experience of being catcalled, and then to kind of have this additional layer of race on top of that. So my experience of being catcalled is universal with many people, but my experience of being like racistly catcalled is more specific.
Yeah.
So trying to find those things, or my experience of having a boss say something to me in front of colleagues and no one speaking up is quite universal, probably. But like it being a race issue is more specific.
So you had the stanza about like the guy in the orchestra saying that like when you cut your hair it was more professional or something stupid like that, and it makes me sad that people have to deal with that. It just grosses me out a bit that there are people like that in the world, and I love that you're calling it out.
Yeah, and it is a specific thing. Like I had dreadlocks. That is not seen as very orchestral. Classical music is about 300 years behind the rest of the world. In gender, in race, in so many things. And that was like a decision. Like I was like graduating, and I was like, is that gonna be seen as presentable? So those sorts of choices.
It's heartbreaking you even have to make those choices.
Yeah. And I feel like, if I was in, I've been in similar situations where I'm like, this is what you're getting, like now. But I feel like you kind of, I certainly had to go through those choices to get to me now, where I'm like, you get what you see. Like,
I love that. That you feel empowered now. I mean, not, I love that people have been horrible to no, I love that you feel more empowered now, and that I guess so. I was speaking to Charlotte about this a while back, like one of our other friends, Charlotte Campbell, and she was saying how she sometimes finds it hard because she is this like beautiful, kind of like conventionally attractive petite blonde woman, and she fits all these like conventional stereotypes. And she's like, so yeah, they always like invite me on TV to speak about like busking and performing and all this stuff because I think they think I'm a safe choice. And she was saying how it's kind of conflicting for her because on the one hand she's like, okay, well now I'm in this position of power, I can kind of, make some waves from the inside out, but also, why should anyone have to conform to those standards just to be heard and help other people,
Mm.
it's conflicting because like do you want to conform to make a change, or do you want to fight to make a change? Which one's going to be more effective in the right circumstance? And it's impossible to know what to do sometimes.
I mean, like I had the experience sort of, I guess it was probably about August 2020, where everyone had suddenly realized that race was an issue.
What? Since when?
And I had just been really vocal speaking about it kind of online. And it meant that suddenly, kind of again in sort of some of the organizations I work for, in the sort of more classical side of things, or workshop leading side, I was pretty much the only not white face that they had to kind of call on. And I've always had this where like I left my university, graduated, and like 4 years later, my face was still on posters and like marketing and stuff. And you kind of think like, well, I know this is a great face, but like any kind of, what kind of image are you selling there with that? And so I was suddenly in this sort of position where sometimes I was getting sort of job offers and I couldn't help but worry that it was because they needed to improve their optics rather than because I was qualified for the job. And some of the jobs I'm sure it was fine, I was qualified for, but certainly speaking in certain spaces and kind of feeling like I was suddenly being asked to solve racism in their company, and I was like, I can't do that for you, like so that was a really kind of weird time, a really really strange time, and that felt strange while it was happening, and then it kind of feels weird that just like hasn't happened, isn't happening anymore, or maybe it's happening in a more kind of nuanced way and conversations are continuing kind of behind closed doors, or maybe people are like, tick, we've solved the race issue, like
done it now, move on.
Move on, like what's cool at the moment, like, so it's hard to know. You can only see kind of out, hopefully through action we will see schemes for young people, or we'll see increased diversity of hiring, or we'll see like subject matters that continue to challenge like status quotas. We'll see.
That must be frustrating though. I remember, so I've been doing this series of videos on why we still need feminism, and it's still an ongoing thing. It's, God, the research is heavy. But one of the things I found is it looked at different orchestras around the world, and I think it was, I want to say like the Philharmonic one in New York or something like that. For a long time, it was all white men, like nearly 87% white men or something like that. And they ended up switching to blind auditions. Where they auditioned the musicians literally behind a curtain, and they couldn't see who it was. They didn't know who it was. And once they switched to blind auditions, the amount of women they hired increased dramatically. The amount of just general people of color they hired increased dramatically. And it's interesting, but like you look at that and you think, okay, well, great. Why don't we do that in all fields? But that's not really possible, is it?
Right. And to speak to that specific research, once they opened blind auditions, it went to something like 50-50 people coming through. And then in orchestras we have a system called the trial system. So because there's a kind of, do you blend as a section, people want to watch you actually playing as an ensemble. So you may get to that stage, and it was 50-50 getting to that stage. The people that get through the trial system, which is a combination of like your peers' votes, kind of the conductors and things like that, again it went like right back to all white men again. And I mean, like it's still slightly better, but it proves that there's these perceptions around who should be doing certain types of jobs, and what the socializing should be, or should be going to the pub, or what, whatever these things are, fitting in with the laddie banter. Like, I mean, orchestras are very broken. I could help you with a whole other video on that. For sure.
Next video, Rosie complains about orchestras for a good reason.
For 3.5 hours. Yeah,
Live
but
stream tomorrow night, yeah.
yeah. Let me just the real tea.
We'll get some wine and we'll just complain.
Oh no.
I'll just be sat here like, go on, tell me more.
It was like dictaphone flashing. I'm like, Rosie tanks her career in classical music. Yeah, I mean, any of these conversations are still ongoing. And to answer your earlier question, why now? I think because I want to keep these conversations going. I'm really scared about sharing it because I know that it opens me up. Like people online have written horrible comments about me literally explaining semiquavers, right? About me literally talking about rhythm, about me talking about things that are completely inoffensive because for whatever reason they don't like it. You know, the trolls or the comments or the people that have a lot of anger and they want to put it out via the keyboard. And that's about, I'm sorry, but very inoffensive things. Like I literally recently did a video with me and a guy and we did a cover of Ed Sheeran and someone commented, "Oh, the man's in the back because he's inferior." Just like, are you okay? Like what? I know. But that's
I don't know what to say to that.
but it's like, I guess, you know, if people can have that level of anger about an Ed Sheeran cover,
yeah.
How will they respond to me like standing behind these words and like putting my name to them? And I know it's not going to be unerringly positive, you know, and some people have and will and get very angry about it. But I think that that's why it's important to be sharing it now. But I'm scared. I am scared to do it again.
Well, you know, I've got your back. You know, so many of us have your back, and I'm sure a lot of my viewers will as well. And I hope you get a lot of support and love for it because, like you say, what you're saying is worth talking about. It needs sharing. And a comment I get quite a lot when I do get kind of negative comments and stuff, I have some viewers who always remind me, if you're not making people angry, you're not doing it right.
Yeah.
So...
And the good side is I've been able to use, I went into a secondary school and used the song about hashtag, and it was so interesting. The conversations that these like sort of 13, 14-year-olds were having about it, and to know that it was my words that sparked that off was just like the best feeling, because they are, at the end of the day, the people that we need to be making sure are getting some good conversations, some good joyful like experiences in life. So if it can touched especially that age group and they can say nice, or not nice, but have good conversations, so yeah, putting it up, making it like a real thing, then hopefully gives it some legitimacy to then be spoken about and discussed a bit more. So it's gonna be okay.
You're gonna do great, don't worry. Okay, here's a kind of a little bit of an out there random question, but you work with a lot of kids in schools of all different ages. How have you found that their opinions have changed over the last few years, both in regards to things like racism and sexism and pretty much everything like that? Because now you have people like Andrew Tate who do target a lot of younger boys. And have you found that kids are kind of more receptive to what people are saying online, like both the good and bad? Or
such an interesting question. I think yes. So I recently did a project with Girls Rock London, who are an amazing group that put together kind of a week of rock band activities for young women and non-binary children. And it was just this amazing week of challenging people, like talking to people about taking up space, about making music, and how the act of performing, it doesn't have to be this like polished act, but it's just about getting up there and speaking out. And, you know, the levels of anxiety that I'm seeing in young people generally, obviously the pandemic led to people being inside. And while it was difficult enough for many of us, for those teenagers, like to not have all of those opportunities, I think you can see how difficult that was. And we're sort of seeing people now who should have been running around and giggling and, you know, messing around in science lessons, who were kind of confined to their homes, and whatever that may have meant. And especially for kind of lower income families, that was not this kind of lovely sitting outside in the sunshine thing that it was that some of the MPs might have thought it was, you know. So I'm seeing a lot of that kind of anxiety, like resistance to going outside and kind of intermingling, more so than I ever have before. And yeah, I think that the ability to be connected online, and certainly to connect with sort of subgroups that people may resonate with, lots of that has been super positive. Like young people generally, their kind of connection to their gender identity, that's so lovely to see generally. I was in a school the other day, and I kind of was in a I was in a school and I have a cajon, and I was pulling some different bits of equipment out, and they wrapped it up in whatever bit of fabric I had available, happened to be a pride flag or whatever. And I was pulling it out, and this girl in the front row was just like,
Oh, bless her.
And she was like, you know, it was year 8, so she was like 12, 13, and she was like, Miss, are you? And I was like, yeah, I'm a lesbian. And she was like,
Oh,
and that
bless.
was so exciting because when I was a kid, you know, I grew up in Brighton, okay, so I had some gay role models, but it was still the most exciting thing in the world to see myself reflected in a grown-up ever. So to be able to be that model for young people and to say like, I love my skin, I love you know, I love being a lesbian, I've got a
Yeah.
lovely partner, like I'm living a lovely life, is so nice. It's just so nice to just be normal, and to be proud of those things and to be really normal about them is joyful.
Oh, I love that so much. Oh, that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all that. Is there anything else you want to talk about, or should we go into the performance? What do
Do
you
it.
fancy? Yeah.
This will be possibly the first time I've done this one live, like to an audience. So
Oh, I'm very excited to hear it.
racist is a big word. It's hard to make it stick. If I suggest you wear it, you'll be sure it doesn't fit. Yet when every person with dark skin has suffered abuse, who's doing it? Clearly someone's confused. You don't think I'm subhuman. Undecided if protest is wrong, you rarely say the N-word, only while singing along. You're definitely one of the good guys. You hate the KKK, and honestly, you don't see colour. It doesn't really matter these days. But doing nothing isn't enough anymore. The man who spat on me for my skin, he wasn't you, but who? The officer who punched me for my skin wasn't you, it's true. It's not you who touches me in the street, who tugs on my hair, who kisses your teeth, stands up over me, shouts, "Oi monkey!" chose a dark night to follow me. But somebody does because somebody has, but who? Someone you know. It's all part of your system. Just a link in a racist chain, keeping us enslaved. Doing nothing isn't enough anymore. The words that hurt know the face that scowls, the tongues that taunt know the eyes that roll, the mouths that shout know the lips that spit, hands that shove know fists that hit, and we all know the knees that kill. For years it's been deemed acceptable that those who die most are always my people. It's all connected. Doing nothing isn't enough anymore. So try something, one word you speak in defence of our fight. Ripples spread, spreads power overnight. Just one utterance, mate, that's not on. And change has begun. People, not policies, push forward laws. Alter what you hear behind closed doors. It hasn't worked, you're vague. Be kind, engage with your body and mind. You don't have to scream, you don't have to shout. Just speak up, just speak out. You're static, you're silent, twiddling your thumbs, watching nothing get done. Just another link in a racist chain, keeping us enslaved. Doing nothing isn't enough anymore. Our system's left unshaken if everything stays the same. Unless you actually fight for us, nothing will ever change. We need a critical mass of population shouting, "This is wrong!" I need to hear your voice, join with me, sing my song. Alter policy, make actions priority, call out hypocrisy, acknowledge the colony, self-assess honestly, with genuine apologies, spot hurtful ideology, end inequality. Be brave, have that conversation, give yourself an education. You're 1 degree of separation from somebody who wants me out this nation. Search for the closest racist, they won't be far away. And if they live inside your head, make a change today. Trust, this is an issue, stare at it head on. It's a problem for black people, but it's not a black people problem. It's all of you, sitting still, quietly looking away. Doing nothing isn't enough anymore. Break this chain. Doing nothing isn't enough anymore. Stop doing nothing isn't enough anymore. Break this chain. Do be enough. Do nothing no more. It's never been enough. Do nothing no more.
That was incredible. I'm proud of you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much for doing that. Like, it really is brilliant. Thank you. I'm sure my viewers are going to love it.
Thank you for letting me do it live on your channel.
And Kubi loved it very much.
Oh,
She's here
yes,
as well.
The harshest critic is on site.
What do you think, Pumpkin? Did Rosie do good? Did Auntie Rosie do good? There was a grumble, so I think that's a yes.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me on here.
thank you so much for
Honor.
coming and talking. And it's been a really great conversation. And thank you so much. I think we are going to have another conversation now over on your channel, aren't we? About kind of learning new
I'm
skills
gonna
as we get
interview
older.
you.
Yeah,
Ha.
I'm a little nervous. You kind of sprung this on me. So,
I thought that was the
yeah.
best way though, because I felt like if I told you in advance, you'd have been more nervous.
What? No, that doesn't sound like me. You know me so well.
All right, let's do
Um,
it.
but yeah, we're going to be talking about kind of like getting into poetry at an older age, learning new skills, and slightly older age, and how like it's never too late to start stuff, right? And a whole bunch of other interesting stuff. So you will be able to go watch that over on Rosie's channel. I will link that down in the video description and as a pinned comment. I'll also link your Spotify and all sorts of cool stuff like that. I'll link specifically to your new EP, which is coming out when?
Tuesday, the 23rd of May.
Amazing. Hopefully this video will be out a couple of days before then, so people will be able to go. Can they like pre-save it and stuff?
Pre-save, pre-save.
Perfect. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we end?
It's just a joy. I love all the things that you do. Your videos are so interesting. You
Oh,
are a
Rosie.
fantastic human, and thank you for having me here.
Oh, that's really sweet. Thank you. Oh, I love you to bits, and thank you so much for doing this. And to everyone watching, thank you for watching. And I'm sure me and Rosie will both see you again very soon.